What if I told you that many women over 60 quietly begin to resent the very men they once vowed to love forever? Not because love is gone, not because they want someone new, but because years of small disappointments, unshared burdens, and silence build up like invisible walls. It's a truth most couples never say out loud, yet it explains why so many marriages in later life feel lonely even when two people still live under the same roof. Welcome to our channel. Here we share real stories and practical truths about aging relationships and emotional health. If you care about love, respect, and joy in the second half of life, you're in the right place. Before we dive in, let me ask, where are you watching from? Type your city or state in the comments. We'd love to know. And if you want more insights like this, hit subscribe so you don't miss a single story. Stay with me until the very end of this video, because the last reason we'll share is the most powerful one of all. It could change the way you see your marriage forever. Now let's step into the first reason why so many women begin to feel a quiet distance from their husbands as the years go by. Reason number one, when what was once charming becomes exhausting. In the early years of marriage, little quirks often feel sweet. Take Linda, for example. In her 30s, she adored the way her husband Paul would forget his wallet, spill his coffee, or laugh at his own jokes. It felt boyish, endearing, almost like proof that he was carefree and full of life. She loved how he would offer her the last bite of dinner or never forget to hug her goodnight. But now in their 60s, those very same habits weigh on her spirit. When Paul misplaces his glasses for the third time in one morning, Linda no longer laughs. She sighs. When he repeats the same story she's heard 100 times, it doesn't feel funny. It feels tiring. Why does this shift happen? Because Linda has changed. She is no longer the young woman amused by clumsiness. She is a mature woman carrying bills, grandchildren, aging parents, and her own need for peace. Her heart still wants love, but it also craves partnership. Someone who listens, someone who shares the weight of life, not just someone who says I love you, but someone who shows it in action. If you've ever felt this same quiet frustration, type the number one in the comments. Your voice might help another woman feel less alone. Paul hasn't grown worse. He's standing still. But Linda has moved forward. And when one person grows while the other stays behind, love begins to feel uneven. The charm of yesterday turns into the fatigue of today. This doesn't mean the love is gone. It means expectations have deepened. And if both partners don't evolve together, distance becomes unavoidable. Ask yourself this: how many times have you sighed at something your partner still does the same way? After decades, those sighs are not signs of weakness. They are signs of change, signs that the relationship needs a new rhythm. Because life after 60 is not just about romantic dates or sweet gestures. It is about surviving long nights, supporting family, rediscovering yourself, and needing a companion who truly walks beside you. And here lies the truth: if habits don't grow, if attention doesn't adjust, then even the smallest quirks can open the widest gap. But this is only the beginning, because the first cracks in love often don't start with words of anger. They begin with small tasks that slowly pile up unseen and unshared. Which leads us to the next reason, the one so many women carry silently, the hidden weight of responsibility that no one else seems to notice. Reason number two, the quiet weight no one talks about. Every home has a rhythm, but for many women past 60, that rhythm feels like a one-woman show. Take Carol, for instance. She wakes up before sunrise. She makes breakfast, tidies the kitchen, checks her husband's medication, and calls her sister to remind her about their mother's doctor's appointment. By the time her husband John walks into the room, she's already spinning through a dozen tasks. And what does John say? "Carol, have you seen my blue shirt?" It's not cruelty, it's not neglect in the obvious sense, but it's another small reminder that Carol carries the invisible weight of their home. She remembers the bills, the family birthdays, the dietary restrictions, the endless appointments. It's a full-time job, without weekends, without thank yous, without recognition. One day, Carol found the courage to speak up. "I feel like I'm doing everything alone." John smiled softly and replied, "You've always been so good at organizing things. I'm just not built for that." He thought he was complimenting her, But for Carol, it cut deep. Because praise without partnership is just another way of saying, the weight is yours, not mine. If you've ever felt invisible inside your own marriage, leave the number 2 in the comments. It may be the comfort another woman needs today. This is how resentment grows. Not through screaming matches or broken plates, but through silence. Through the sighs no one hears. Through the constant reminders, the endless lists, the invisible labor that slowly erodes a woman's sense of being a partner and replaces it with the role of caretaker. And here's the most dangerous part. When she feels unseen long enough, she stops speaking. Not because she has nothing to say, but because she no longer believes anyone is listening. That silence is louder than any argument. It signals not anger but exhaustion, not rejection but surrender. Ask yourself this in your home: who keeps the rhythm alive? Who remembers the things that keep life moving? And does that person ever feel thanked, recognized, supported? Because when the answer is no, a quiet wall begins to form. One day it may be too tall to climb. But weight doesn't just come from chores or bills. Sometimes the heaviest burden is the one carried in silence when the body itself begins to change. And that brings us to the third reason women grow distant in later life, when physical changes reshape not only the body, but also the heart. Reason number 3. When the body changes, emotions change too. There was a time when evenings were Linda's favorite part of the day. She and her husband Peter would sit on the couch, share popcorn, laugh at old movies, and hold hands until they drifted to sleep. His touch made her feel safe, warm, and cherished. But now in her 60s, Linda feels something different. When Peter reaches for her hand, her body stiffens. What once brought comfort now sometimes feels uncomfortable. She doesn't want it to be this way, but her body has changed. Menopause hot flashes, dryness, aching joints, restless nights. These are not just physical struggles. They reshape emotions, lower energy, and alter the way intimacy is experienced. It's not that she no longer loves Peter. It's that she needs something different, gentler, more thoughtful. One night Linda tried to explain. She whispered, "I feel like my body is changing, and it scares me." Peter looked puzzled. He assumed she had simply lost interest. So instead of leaning closer, he quietly pulled away. This is how distance grows. Not through anger or betrayal, but through silence, through misinterpretation, through two people unsure of how to bridge a gap that no one ever taught them how to cross. For many women, the need is simple. A kind word, a gentle hug, a compliment that says, "I still see you." But too often those needs go unspoken, and too often husbands misread the silence as rejection, when in truth it is a plea for connection on new terms. If you've ever felt your body change and wished your partner understood without judgment, type the number 3 in the comments. You may help another woman feel less alone in her journey. Here's the truth. A woman doesn't stop wanting closeness after 60. She just wants it differently, slower, softer, with patience and care. The danger lies in ignoring this shift, because when physical distance replaces affection, it seeps into every corner of marriage. The hugs fade, the laughter softens, the bond weakens. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you truly looked at your partner and asked, "What do you need now?" That question alone can open doors that years of silence have closed. But when questions aren't asked and words aren't heard, something even more painful emerges. Not physical distance this time, but emotional withdrawal. The slow erosion of feeling seen and valued. And that brings us to the fourth reason, one that cuts deeper than any argument, when what is left unsaid begins to break the bond. Reason number 4, what's not said is what breaks us. Marriages rarely collapse in one big explosion. They don't shatter with a single fight. Instead, they erode quietly like water dripping on stone. Take Susan and her husband Mark. One morning she stood at the sink rinsing dishes after breakfast. She called out gently, "Mark, could you help me clear the table?" Without looking up from his newspaper, he muttered, "I'll do it later." But later never came. It wasn't a war. It wasn't even harsh words. It was something far smaller and yet far more dangerous. a request ignored, a need dismissed, and a little crack formed in Susan's heart. Over time, those cracks multiplied. It wasn't the loud arguments that wore her down, it was the silence. The moments when she spoke but wasn't heard, when she asked but was brushed aside, when she tried but felt invisible. One afternoon she said, "If I don't remind you, will you remember Mom's doctor's appointment?" Mark shrugged. "You're better at that stuff. I'm busy." He didn't mean to wound her, but those words left her feeling utterly alone even while married. This is how love weakens, not in thunder, but in whispers, not in drama, but in dismissal. If you've ever spoken and felt like no one truly heard you, type the number 4 in the comments. Your voice might remind someone else that they are not crazy for feeling unseen. The hardest part is that when a woman stops speaking, it doesn't mean everything is fine. It means she has stopped believing that words matter, that silence is not peace, it is surrender. Ask yourself this: how many times has your partner repeated the same plea only for you to nod and then forget? Each time it happens, another brick is laid in a wall between you, and one day the wall feels too high to climb. The cure is not grand gestures or big promises. It is as simple as saying, "I hear you," as simple as putting the paper down and meeting her eyes, as simple as letting her know her voice still matters. Because what breaks a bond is not what we fight about, it's what we ignore. And once a woman feels invisible, she begins to drift not out of anger, but out of quiet resignation. And here lies the turning point. Because when a woman finally turns inward, she often discovers something even more unsettling. Not just that she feels unheard, but that she no longer recognizes herself inside the marriage. Which leads us to the next reason, perhaps one of the most eye-opening of all: when a woman rediscovers who she is, but no longer sees her husband standing beside her. Reason number 5. When a woman rediscovers herself, but no longer sees her husband beside her. For decades, Emily poured herself into being a wife, a mother, and a caretaker. Her days were filled with school schedules, work deadlines, late-night dinners, and caring for her aging parents. Life moved fast, and she rarely had a moment to stop and ask, "Who am I outside of all this?" Then the children grew up. The house became quiet. For the first time in years, Emily found herself alone with time. At first it felt strange, but slowly something new began to stir. She picked up books she once loved but had abandoned years ago. She signed up for an evening painting class. She even tried yoga, laughing at herself the first time she wobbled in tree pose. With every small step, Emily remembered parts of herself she had buried under responsibility. Her curiosity, her creativity, her independence. But with each rediscovery came an ache, because when she turned to her husband David, she realized he hadn't moved with her. He was still stuck in the same routines, the same conversations, the same view of who she had been 20 years ago. One evening, Emily asked herself, do we even share the same dreams anymore? Does he really know who I am now? The answer terrified her. This is not about falling out of love. It's about drifting apart. It's about realizing that while she has grown, he has not. That she is rediscovering life while he stands still. Many women in their 60s don't leave their marriages because they stop loving their husbands. They stay, but inside they feel profoundly alone. It's the loneliness of sitting next to someone and realizing you no longer share the same world. If you've ever felt yourself change while your partner stayed the same, type the number 5 in the comments. That one word might give another woman the courage to admit her own truth. The tragedy is that this distance is not inevitable. If a husband chooses to listen, to ask, to step into her new rhythm, both can discover a fresh chapter together. A chapter defined not by habit, but by mutual growth. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you truly asked your partner, what excites you now? What are you curious about today? These questions matter more than grand vacations or expensive gifts. They are the bridge that keeps two people walking side by side as they change. But when those questions aren't asked, the gap widens, and slowly the marriage becomes a place where one person evolves while the other fades into the background. And when a woman no longer feels seen in her rediscovery, the pain deepens even further. Because what vanishes next is not just shared dreams, it's the tenderness of being looked at with love. Which leads us to the sixth reason, one that pierces straight to the heart when loving glances disappear. Reason number 6, when loving glances disappear. One crisp October morning, Helen stood in front of her bathroom mirror. At 68, she saw the gentle lines around her eyes and the silver threads woven through her once dark hair. She didn't mind the changes. She had earned every mark of age through years of sacrifice, care, and love. What hurt wasn't the mirror, it was the silence. Her husband, Robert, no longer looked at her the way he once did. Gone were the playful glances, the sudden compliments, the warm smile when she walked into a room. Now there was only routine, familiarity, and a kind of quiet that made her wonder if she had become invisible. For years, Helen had been the center of Robert's world. She remembered how his eyes used to light up when she entered, how he would touch her hand at the dinner table just because. But now when she passed by, his eyes stayed on the television. When she spoke, his answers were short, distracted. Aging changes everyone, yes. But love isn't only about youth or beauty. It's about being seen. It's about being cherished no matter what the mirror shows. Without those little signs of affection, a glance, a smile, a kind word, a woman doesn't just feel older. She feels forgotten. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you looked at your partner as if they were still the most important person in the room, not out of habit, but with intention, with tenderness? If you've ever longed for that simple recognition, leave the number 6 in the comments. It may speak for countless others who feel the same. Helen didn't want to be 30 again. She didn't want roses or grand gestures. She simply wanted to know that Robert still saw her, that he noticed the woman she had become, not just the roles she had played. Because love lives in details, in the small acts that tell someone you still matter to me. When those disappear, the heart grows cold, not in anger but in quiet sorrow. And here lies the danger: when affection fades, doubt creeps in. Am I still loved? Am I still beautiful to him? Am I still worth noticing? These questions can wound more deeply than any harsh word. Yet love can be reignited. A soft gaze, a thoughtful compliment, a gentle touch, these tiny sparks can warm even the coldest season. But when they are absent for too long, another shadow rises. Not about romance or beauty, but about survival itself. Because in later life, one of the heaviest strains on marriage is not emotional, but practical, and that strain is money. Which brings us to the 7th reason many women feel distant in marriage after 60, when financial pressure quietly erodes the bond. Reason number 7, when financial pressure slowly wears down the bond. Money may not buy love, but the lack of it can slowly chip away at even the strongest marriage. For many couples past 60, financial pressure becomes a storm that hovers quietly over the home. Take Patricia and her husband James. In their younger years, they dreamed big. They laughed about the vacations they would take, the home they might retire in, the adventures they'd finally enjoy when work was behind them. But now reality looks very different. Rising medical costs, retirement funds that don't stretch far enough, and the constant worry of supporting aging parents have become daily shadows. Patricia feels them heavy on her chest every morning. She checks the bills, calculates the grocery list, and quietly wonders how long their savings will last. James, on the other hand, often shrugs it off. Things will work themselves out, he says, turning back to the television. He doesn't mean harm, but his avoidance makes Patricia feel like she is carrying the entire future on her own. This is how emotional distance grows. Not because love has disappeared, but because burdens are not shared. Instead of facing the storm together, one person stands in the rain while the other hides under the roof. If you've ever felt like you're the only one worrying about the financial future, type the number 7 in the comments. You'll remind someone else that they're not alone. Money struggles are more than numbers on a page. They change the way couples talk or stop talking. Conversations that were once filled with curiosity and dreams slowly shrink into arguments about bill savings and what can't be afforded. For Patricia, it wasn't just about money. It was about trust. She wanted to feel that James was her teammate, her partner in planning her equal, in facing fears about the future. Instead, she felt alone. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you sat with your partner and asked, "What's our plan? What are we preparing for together?" These questions can build unity. Their absence builds walls. Because marriage is not only about sharing joy, it's about sharing burdens. When one person is left to carry the weight of tomorrow, resentment quietly replaces love. Yet there is hope. Sometimes all it takes is a husband looking into his wife's eyes and saying, "I'm with you. Let's figure this out together." Those words can rebuild more security than any paycheck. But when those words are missing, when burdens are uneven, the cracks in marriage grow wider. And what slips away next isn't just money or dreams, it's respect. Which leads us to the eighth and final reason many women feel distance in later life: when love fades without fairness and respect. Reason number 8: when love fades without respect. Respect. It's a small word, but without it, love begins to crack and crumble. Take Margaret and her husband Thomas. At 66, Margaret had lived through storms most women know well: raising children, juggling bills, caring for her parents, and putting her own needs aside for decades. She wasn't looking for flowers or fancy dinners anymore. What she needed most was something far more powerful: recognition. But Thomas didn't see it. When Margaret shared her worries, he would laugh gently and say, "You worry too much." When she asked for help, he brushed it aside with, "You've always been better at that than me." He believed he was being kind, but every smile, every shrug, every dismissive word chipped away at her sense of worth. Respect is not about agreeing on everything. It's about listening. It's about acknowledging the other person's voice, their needs, their dignity. When it's missing, a woman begins to feel like a shadow in her own home, present, working, giving, but invisible. If you've ever felt like the emotional weight of your relationship rests entirely on your shoulders, type the number 8 in the comments. That one number could give another woman courage to admit the same. Here is the truth: love without respect becomes fragile. It loses its warmth, its intimacy, its soul. It turns into routine, a daily exchange of duties instead of a bond of equals. Margaret no longer wanted Thomas to adore the younger woman she once was. She wanted him to see the woman she had become, a woman who had grown, changed, and endured, a woman who deserved to be treated not as an assistant, but as a partner. Ask yourself this: do you thank your partner for the countless invisible things they do? Do you tell them their thoughts matter? Do you remind them they are seen not just for what they give, but for who they are? Because when love lacks respect, it doesn't explode, it withers. It fades quietly until all that's left is silence. But it doesn't have to be this way. When two people choose to honor one another, even in small ways, love can be renewed. Respect is the soil where affection grows. Without it, nothing thrives. And this brings us to the heart of it all. We've walked through 8 reasons women often feel distance from their husbands after 60 habits that grow: exhausting, invisible weight, physical changes, silence, rediscovery, fading affection, financial stress, and the absence of respect. Now it's time to bring these threads together, because love doesn't vanish with age, it changes form. And in our conclusion, we'll explore how couples can still reclaim connection before it's too late. Love doesn't disappear with age, it transforms. And if we don't pause to notice, what remains after decades together may be silence, distance, and unspoken hurt. We've walked through 8 very real reasons women often feel disconnected from their husbands after 60. Small habits that once felt charming now feel tiring. Invisible responsibilities that pile up without thanks. The physical and emotional changes that shift intimacy. The quiet erosion of not being heard. The rediscovery of self that isn't shared. The loss of tender glances. The stress of financial burdens. And above all, the fading of respect. None of these begin with drama. They begin quietly in what goes unsaid and what goes unnoticed. But here's the truth: if we understand the why, we can still change the how. Marriage at any age can be renewed if both people take small steps toward each other. Listening more, adjusting together, growing side by side. You don't need perfection, you need presence. You need a partner who chooses every day to walk with you, not out of habit, but out of love and respect. If this video spoke to you, I invite you to share a piece of your story in the comments, or simply type the number 9 to let others know they are not alone. Your words may be the comfort someone else needs today. And if you found value here, please subscribe to our channel. Each week we bring stories that help you live with more connection, strength, and grace. Because happiness is never a given. It is a choice made by two people choosing each other again and again.